So have you guys gotten your nose on tobacco honey yet? It's a really delicious combination of luxurious, powdery, sweet honey with tobacco. It's a bit dirty, smoky, ashy tobacco. Really love wearing it. So since I've been wearing it, and actually did a short video on this as well if you guys didn't catch it, I thought I'd put together a video of honey and tobacco fragrances. A really intoxicating combination of two notes, and I love these two notes together. If you're a fan of tobacco and honey or honey and tobacco fragrances, then stick around to find out 13 fragrances that feature these notes together. And I'm also going to talk about tobacco honey. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yes, today I'm talking about honey and tobacco, or tobacco and honey fragrances. What a great combination of notes. I really love these two notes together. They do work really beautifully together. You know, it's a sweet, syrupy, powdery, sticky kind of a note with the kind of dirtiness of the tobacco, the ashiness, the smokiness. They do really blend really beautifully together. The tobacco does tone down the sweetness of the honey, and it creates a perfect marriage, I think. They do really play wonderfully together, and there's a lot of fragrances out there that combine these notes. One of the very first fragrances I feel like that really got me into appreciating tobacco and honey is Mugler's Pure Havane, which unfortunately is discontinued now. But another fragrance that I, got into wearing tobacco and honey was Cherries, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's talk about tobacco honey first. Guerlain's latest L'Art et la Métier collection fragrance, although I shouldn't say this is the latest because there's Fève Gourmande that has just launched as well. But this is honey, oud, vanilla, tobacco, tonka beans, sandalwood, sesame, anise, and cloves. Yes, the combination is really, really, really great. It's basically a lot of honey with not as much tobacco, but there's tobacco in there to tone it down, to give you that kind of smoky dirtiness of the tobacco. I feel like it's burned, ashy tobacco in here. You can feel it. But I feel like there's more honey in comparison to the tobacco. There's vanilla, so it does create a syrupy stickiness. And then, of course, there's a bit of oud in the dry down, and sandalwood and tonka in the dry down as well. But along the way, there's this kind of like nutty sesame note. And then the cloves do come in along with the anise. It's a perfect combination. I think Delphine Jelk did a great fragrance here for Guerlain. I think she's finally doing some good work. So this is the first fragrance. It's Tobacco Honey from Guerlain. I should say this is also another fragrance that kind of got me into the appreciation of tobacco and honey, although this did remind me of Mugler's Pure Havane. This is NAXOS from the house of XERJOFF. A great combination, but to me this one goes into a bit of a amber fougere direction because there's a lavender note in here and the tonka beans, so it gives you a bit of a fougere-like vibe, but more of a warm amber fougere rather than the lavender and the aromatics and the spices and things like that. So there's bergamot here and lemons, lavender, jasmine, cinnamon, honey, cashmeran, tobacco, tonka, and vanilla. So in the end, it's more aromatic. It's more not as syrupy, sticky, sweet like the tobacco honey, but there are elements of that here in NAXOS as well. But you do get that lavender which cuts through the honey. There's a cinnamon that also cuts through the honey. The warm spice, aromatic, herbal touches, but a really great tobacco and honey combo. Very popular fragrance, I think. This is NAXOS. Let me know if you're a fan of that one. I'd like to find out. And those of you that were fans of Mugler's Pure Havane, do you still have a bottle? What's going on with Mugler? What have they done for the men? They have done nothing for men. In fact, what they're doing is basically killing the brand, launching Mugler's Angel Elixir and completely falling flat. But moving on to a house called DIOR. Everybody knows DIOR. This is TOBACOLOR, this one right here. So I was thinking TOBACOLOR and Tobacco Honey might have similarities, especially since they're under the same parent company, LVMH. But when I'm comparing the two, it's kind of a similar idea, but I much prefer Tobacco Honey from Guerlain over TOBACOLOR. There's something really kind of weird in here that rubs me the wrong way a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. It's almost like something plasticky. I don't know where that's coming from, but still it's a good fragrance. Not as good as Vanilla Diorama, but TOBACOLOR is the combination of honey and tobacco. It's sweet, It's spicy, it's fruity, it's got plum, and then there's that smoke note, although it's got plum and peaches, and then there's that smoke note. The smoke note might be what's kind of rubbing me the wrong way a little bit, and maybe it's the honey. It kind of acts a little bit like, you know, beeswax, and giving me that kind of plasticky, kind of a waxy feeling in here. So it's a bit off-putting, but not a lot. Still, I much prefer Tobacco Honey over TOBACOLOR, but TOBACOLOR is a pretty wonderful offering from the House of DIOR. Let me know if you're a fan of that one. I'd like to find out if you are. But moving on to a house called Pierre Guillaume. It's Animal Mondain, this one right here. So this one's a musky tobacco honey combo, and also kind of reminiscent of a fragrance by Michael Kors called Michael for Men from 2001. I really, really loved that fragrance. It was such a nuclear fragrance when it came out. Really strong. Loved the combo of the tobacco and honey. Fantastic smell. Sadly, it's discontinued, but this one does remind me of it a little bit, but going into more of a musky direction, a bit animalic, which I kind of like in here. It's just the right amount of animalics with the sweetness and the honey and the tobacco and things like that. So it's tobacco, honey, pear leaf, hay, mahogany, animalic notes, powdery notes. Imagine musk ravageur a little bit, but more musky. Maybe something like Sadonaso or Carnicure's muskiness thrown in with the tobacco and honey in here. It's super fantastic. I love, love, love the way this one smells. I just wish it was a little beastlier, which I kind of like, but you can spray a little stronger and get away with it. But Animal Mondain, what a wonderful offering from that house. This is one of the best from that house. Moving on to the house of KILIAN, it's Back to Black. So Back to Black is one of the original KILIANs that I fell in love with, but after I discovered Rose Oud, Incense Oud, Straight to Heaven, Love Don't Be Shy, and things like that. Back to Black is a great combination of tobacco and honey, but for me, the fragrance is very, very subdued. So it doesn't have a lot of projection and sillage. For me, it's very close to the skin. But I think maybe that's how this fragrance is created, to be worn more intimately. But the smell is great. But you know what? I just compared it to tobacco honey. I'm comparing it all to tobacco honey. This one actually, I'm a little bored of it. I've worn so much of it. But in the end, it's kind of Amy Winehouse inspired, I believe. Came out around the time of her album. I can't remember quite exactly what the deal is, but it's called Back to Black, obviously. And Amy Winehouse's album, Back to Black. So this is white honey, tobacco, cherries, vanilla, raspberries, almonds, gingerbread, amber, tonka, nutmeg, benzoin. And you've got all these notes in here, but the fragrance to me is very subdued. It's very close to the skin and doesn't scream, but smells really, really great. Anyway, Back to Black from the House of KILIAN. That is the 5th fragrance I'm talking about today. Okay, next up, going to the House of Unique Luxury. This is the Beverly Hills exclusive, this one right here. Are you guys familiar with this one? This is a fragrance made exclusively for Beverly Hills perfume shop in Beverly Hills. So if you guys ever been there, they used to sell Unique Luxury, I think the first in California. And then everybody started carrying it. Well, Lucky Scent carries it now and some other stores. So this fragrance was created specifically for Beverly Hills. It's called Beverly Hills Exclusive. And it does have tobacco leaf and honey in this. But there's a lot more things going on here. So it's a bit aromatic, very spicy. And then of course it's got ambergris and sandalwood and rose as well. And then orris comes in to give you a powdery edge. So it's more like a cornucopia of a lot of different things. But in the end, honey, tobacco leaf do stand out a bit. But everything else comes in, gives it a supporting, you know, edge to the fragrance and creates for one unique concoction. So if you like the idea of tobacco honey, but that's not what we're focusing on a lot of other things, you've got that here with this fragrance. Lots of spices, lots of orris, lots of tonka, ambergris, sandalwood, and the rose really shines in this one as well. So this is Unique Luxury's Beverly Hills exclusive, the 6th fragrance I'm talking about today. Next, moving on to the House of VILHELM Parfumerie. This is the Oud Affair, this one right here. Are you familiar with the Oud Affair? This to me does remind me a bit of Tobacco Vanille. Tobacco leaves here, oud, honey, black vanilla, ginger butter. It's a yummy combination in that it has oud, but a very wearable oud and also kind of gourmand leaning. Plus that tobacco, of course, the tobacco and honey together really creates for a really wonderful marriage. I really, really think these notes really blend beautifully together, and that's why there are so many fragrances out there utilizing these notes. And then the other unique thing about this one, ginger butter. Yes, it's a bit buttery, it's creamy, there's a creamy texture about it, and it's got the zing of the ginger note, which I quite like, gives it a fresh spice to the fragrance. But either way, the Oud Affair from the house of Wilhelm Parfumerie, a wonderful offering. This next fragrance is definitely one of the better combinations of tobacco and honey, but in this case we've also got tea, ginger, gingerbread, leather, star anise, spices, really intoxicating combination of ingredients and notes. This is Tea for Two from the house of L'Artisan Parfumeur. Are you guys familiar with this one? This one's been around forever. There was a time this got discontinued, and I had like around 2013, 14, and there was people were trying to buy a bottle. This was before they went into the black bottles. They were in the original bottles. And there was a demand for them, and I was visiting France, and I ended up finding 2 bottles, 250 mLs. Bought them, very, very happy, and then guess what? L'Artisan announced they were bringing them back, so they came back. And they've been around for a bit. It's created by Olivia Jacobetti, and I think the combination is really great. So you do have that kind of dirty ashiness of the tobacco in here, along with that cozy tea, the honey, and all those spices together. Really intoxicatingly delicious. So Tea for Two from the house of L'Artisan Parfumeur. Really fantastic fragrance. Now this next fragrance I used to own in a bell jar. This is a Serge Lutens fragrance. I used it up. It was really great, really, really great. I had bought it like 2013 sometime, and one of the better tobacco fragrances. I've forgotten about it, but earlier this year I went to France and I found a really great deal, 50% off on this Serge Lutens Parfumerie Turc. Are you guys familiar with this one? This is a bit animalic for a honey tobacco mix. It's so good though, really, really great. Serge Lutens does some really, really great smelling fragrances. Unfortunately, their fragrances are not the loudest for me, but some of the best, most intoxicating combinations, and this is definitely one of the best from this house. It's tobacco, honey, suede, patchouli, tonka, vanilla, chamomile, styrax, juniper berries, Turkish rose, red currants. Oh man, if you haven't gotten your nose on Serge Lutens Parfumerie Turc, please do. It's really, really great if you love the idea of tobacco and honey with a bit of animalic funk. It's not an overdose of animalics, although some people might find it to be a little strong for them because they're not used to the animalics. I find it to be the right amount, and it is super, super fantastic. Very, very sexy tobacco, honey together with a bit of funk. Really wonderful. It's Parfumerie Turc from the house of Serge Lutens. If you don't know that one, like I said, please do check it out. And then the one that everybody knows about, when I first got into doing fragrance reviews in 2012, everybody was talking about this fragrance. This is Serge Lutens Cherries. Cherries was at the discounters for really inexpensive. You could get a 50 ml for about 50 bucks on FragranceNet, and that's how I ended up with my first bottle of Cherries. Yeah, it's a really great fragrance. I've kind of gotten bored of it, but it's tobacco with honey. There's amber, hay, incense, sandalwood, iris, musk, and rose. The combination is really great. I think the notes are really wonderful, but to me, it's gotten a little boring, unfortunately. I prefer other fragrances a little more, but I feel like when people get into the fragrance community and start consuming niche perfumes, this is one of the fragrances that they go after because everybody used to talk about it. I don't know, maybe it's not like that anymore, but what are your thoughts on Cherries? Are you a fan of this fragrance? I do like the color of the juice, and it definitely was one of my favorites way back then. I think the combination was great, and the addition of rose with this mix was also very, very unique here. So Cherries from the house of Serge Lutens, really great combination of tobacco and honey. And then going to the house of KILIAN, it's tobacco oud, this one right here. Remember, this is one of my favorites from this Oudgasm collection from KILIAN. It was Cafe Oud, my favorite. Tobacco Oud was the second favorite. And this one does remind me a little bit of Tom Ford's Tobacco Oud, because it's got a bit of animalic funk in here as well. It's dirty, like there's a dirtiness and greasiness about the tobacco, but in the end it's white honey, tobacco, patchouli, vanilla, benzoin, praline, oud, geranium, cloves, saffron, mandarin, clary sage, with a little bit of a fruitiness from plums in this. It's really, really great. If you are missing tobacco oud, perhaps get a sample of this if you can. We featured the KILIAN Oudgasm fragrances in a Scent Club kit, but if you can find a sample somewhere, try it to see if you like it. It might remind you of tobacco oud. I don't think they're identical, but there's a dirtiness about this tobacco that's also in tobacco oud. from Tom Ford, and so I get similarities with it. So try that. It's Kayali's Tobacco Oud. That is the 11th fragrance I'm talking about. Moving on to Diptyque, it's Volute. This one right here. Who's familiar with Volute? This is basically a really intoxicating combination of tobacco, iris, opopanax, honey, and cinnamon. Who's a fan of opopanax in fragrances? It's kind of a myrrh note. It's similar to myrrh. It's a bit of a sweet resin. So basically this fragrance is very resinous, spicy, powdery, tobacco, and honey. So the tobacco in this does come off a bit smoky. It's like that smoked dirty ash kind of a tobacco note. And of course the honey kind of really blends beautifully together. And it's interesting, all the fragrances in this video seem like the honey is the smoked kind, not the tobacco leaf before it's burned, if that makes sense. There are fragrances that have the tobacco in unburned, but I feel like all the fragrances in this video, the tobacco does seem like it's burned. And for me, it blends better with sweet notes versus something like Versace's Dreamer. That tobacco I feel like is unburned. It's like a tobacco leaf before it's burned. But here it is a really great smoky tobacco and beautiful syrupy iris. Of course the spices, the resin, and then of course the powderiness from iris. So this is Volute from Diptyque. And last but not least, we're ending the video with a fragrance from the house of Gallivant. Very, very complex fragrance, and a fragrance inspired by the city of Gdansk. This one right here. So this has tobacco and honey and a lot of other notes. So it's a very, very complex fragrance. Gdansk also features ambergris in the notes. So it might come off a bit animalic, maybe a little bit off-putting, but I don't think so, because there's so many things happening here. It does tone down the ambergris touches. But in the end, it's ambergris, honey, plums, cistus, sandalwood, tobacco, vanilla, cypriol, incense, leather, musks, styrax, rose, patchouli, cardamom, and nutmeg. Who's tried this one? Are you familiar with Gdansk? Does it smell like the city of Gdansk? Do let me know. But there's a fruity honey tobacco vibe in this, and some animalics combined with it. Leather and resins all come in as well, and of course spices. Really wonderful offering from this house. Very complex, and I feel like this is one of the most complex from this house of the ones that I've tried. Anyway, Gdansk by the house of Gallivant is the last fragrance I'm talking about today. What are your thoughts on these fragrances? And what are your thoughts on the combination of tobacco and honey? Are there any other tobacco honey fragrances that you're familiar with that I did not mention today? Do let me know. Put a comment down below so I can find out. But either way, guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.